Meanwhile, a former Chief Minister, Edapadi Palanisamy, begins his fight back.
The big comeback campaign by EPS has well and truly begun.
These are all the ultimate players, and this is going to be the ultimate test.
Sleepless for sports. We are reloading sports NDTV style. With the biggest comeback this season, India's OG sports journalist on India's #1 news network.
No games, just sports.
Sports coverage levels up with Boria Majumdar on NDTV.
When facts are fragmented, we put the pieces together. Where power collides with truth, we are there.
Behind me is that massive security arrangements that are in place.
Behind fractured boundaries, we clear the fog of war. Fault Lines with Gauri Dwivedi, only on NDTV World.
In today's interconnected world, India's voice is more crucial than ever. When India speaks, the world listens. At NDTV World, we are that voice, bringing you intelligent and insightful news from India and beyond. From geopolitics and diplomacy to economic shifts, migrations, tech disruptions, and the stories of our diaspora. We cover the news that shapes our global future. NDTV World, your new home for global news is here.
From interesting tech startups to industry-leading companies, politics, sports, culture, curry, cricket. Oh, there's so much to talk about. Like me, if you too thrive on interesting conversations, this is a show you cannot miss. Watch this space to know more about all matters and all people that make Britain what it is today. Out of Britain, with me, Radhika Iyer.
Some say sport is a matter of life and death. The truth is, it is far more serious than that. Sport is about ecstasy and agony, about pain and suffering, about joy and much more. Some say there's no one better to tell these stories. So here I am. Join me, Boria Majumdar, on India's #1 news network.
You are watching the world 24/7 on the NDTV network. I am Parmeshwar Bava. We've got an action-packed bulletin lined up. Let's begin with the top stories you need to know. US President Donald Trump announced his intention to implement a 50% tariff on Brazilian imports, partially responding to what he terms a witch hunt against his political ally, former Brazil President Jair Bolsonaro, who faces coup-related charges. But at 50%, Brazil would face a higher tariff than any other country in the world, but Trump's letter to Brazil cites imaginary trade deficits. Around 2,300 people are likely to have died of heat-related causes across 12 European cities during a severe heat wave that ended last week, with 2/3 of the deaths directly linked to climate change, as per a new study. A Chinese national has been charged in the US with hacking into American universities' computer systems to steal sensitive COVID-19 research in what authorities describe as a coordinated operation directed by China's intelligence agency. And we've had a short turnaround for the third test as India and England are set to lock horns at the iconic Lord's Stadium. Now, Jasprit Bumrah is expected to be back and play at Lord's as the cameras caught him going full tilt in the nets and eager to better his record. India is currently leading As the leading country of origin for billionaire immigrants in the US, Forbes noted in its America's Richest Immigrants 2025 list that was just released, Israel and Taiwan are next on the list. Well, our big focus, US President Donald Trump launched a multi-front trade assault on Brazil, threatening it with massive new tariffs and demanding the end of criminal charges against his ally, former President Jair Bolsonaro. Now, I'll tell you why this is so significant, because Trump's tariff letter to Brazil is far more aggressive, with a much higher levy than any other trade missive he's sent out this week. And it prompted Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva to push back on what he called interference in the nation's affairs. But this letter threatens $42 billion in annual US imports, everything from steel to coffee, and the potential collapse of a trading relationship with one of the few countries where the US runs a trade surplus. The letter goes on to insist Brazil has treated US social media companies unfairly, accusing the government of censoring free speech and threatening a 50% levy on Brazilian imports. But do note that letter makes no mention of the additional BRICS levy that Trump had just recently threatened. But at 50%, Brazil would face a higher tariff than any other country in the world, based on the rates the administration has confirmed so far. And as I mentioned, Brazil's president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, firmly rejected Trump's demand that legal proceedings against former President Bolsonaro be dropped, and his claim that a 50% tariff on Brazilian imports was necessary to close a trade deficit that does not in fact exist. We spoke to international relations analyst Uria Fancelli. She gives us the lowdown from Sao Paulo.
Trump's 50% tariffs on Brazilian products might have, in a very limited sense, a political angle. He's clearly trying to protect Jair Bolsonaro, Brazil's former president, from what he's calling a political witch hunt by the country's judiciary. Let's not forget, Bolsonaro tried to stage a coup in January 2023, very similar to Trump's Capitol riot. His supporters invaded the buildings of all three branches of government in Brasilia, and as a result, Bolsonaro is now banned from running for office and could even face prison. So this pressure from Trump isn't just about economics, it's a message to his own base. He's presenting Bolsonaro as a victim of the same forces he claims are after him. It fits his narrative. Strong leaders, silenced by institutions, fighting for freedom. But honestly, I don't think that's the real reason behind such drastic economic measure. What really matters is timing. As I've been saying all week, this announcement comes right after the BRICS summit hosted by Lula. And Trump had already threatened to slap tariffs on countries that took what he called an anti-American stance. So this move is clearly part of a broader strategy to punish governments he sees as challenging the US global dominance. And it has nothing to do with trading balances. In fact, Trump's letter claims that the US is being treated unfairly by Brazil, but that's simply not true. The United States actually runs a trade surplus with Brazil. So this isn't about correcting economic injustice. It's about sending a political message. And there's more. Trump has always used economic pressure as leverage. He did it with Mexico, he did it with Canada, and he's even talked about taking control of the Panama Canal to push out foreign influence. His goal is to reset US influence in Latin America, not through dialogue, but through pressure. And tariffs are his favorite tool. This isn't about defending shared values or protecting American voters. It's about control, about reshaping the map of influence in the region and selling that as patriotism to his base. He wraps it in slogans, but in the end, it's old school power politics dressed up in America First language.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump has announced a fresh round of tariffs on imports from 7 nations: Sri Lanka, Algeria, Iraq, Libya, the Philippines, Moldova, and Brunei. These tariffs will come into effect on the 1st of August. The White House has shared letters sent by Trump to leaders of these 7 nations, which mentioned the tariffs they will face while exporting goods to the United States. The letters assign individual tariff rates for each country. Algeria, Sri Lanka and Iraq received import tax rates of 30%. Brunei, Libya and Moldova got 25%. And the Philippines was assigned 20%. But Wednesday's letters are the latest in a slate the Trump administration sent to nations around the globe. On Monday, in fact, the US president had threatened Japan and South Korea with 25% tariff, stepping up pressure on the two historical US allies and a dozen other economies to reach trade deals with Washington.
And we'll go 10%. So we'll do the same thing.
Moving on, the devastating floods sweeping through central Texas have actually claimed at least 119 lives, with over 160 people still accounted for. The catastrophe has triggered fresh scrutiny of the country's emergency response model, especially as US President Donald Trump, who recently proposed phasing out the Federal Emergency Management Agency, is now touting a swift federal response to this current crisis. Moving on from conducting stem cell experiments in a glove box to experiencing microgravity for the first time, Indian Air Force officer Shubhanshu Shukla is now nearing the end of his 14-day mission aboard the International Space Station. The Axiom 4 crew is set to return to Earth any day. With it, the 4-member crew will bring back what scientists are calling a treasure trove of data, especially significant for India, which made its debut at the 25-year-old Microgravity Lab. We have a reaction from Shubhanshu Shukla, beaming from space. Listen in.
So Shuks, I know you've been very busy with your research that has been brought up from India. Can you tell me about some of the research you've been doing and why it's been particularly interesting and exciting?
Of course. Thank you so much for your question. I would agree. Yes, I have been very busy since the time we have come, doing a lot of research on the station. And I'm very excited, and this mission is actually kind of opening the doors for microgravity or space research for Indian researchers and scientists. And I'm so proud that ISRO has been able to collaborate with national institutions all over the country, and they came up with some fantastic research which I am doing on the station for all the scientists and researchers. And it is exciting. It is a joy to do this. And the research spans, various domains, various disciplines, right from doing some stem cell research and to growing some seeds, seeing the effect of microgravity on seeds, also evaluating the cognitive load on astronauts while they are interacting with screens on board the station. So it has been fantastic. And I feel proud to be this kind of bridge between the researchers and the station to conduct this research on behalf of them. One particular research which I am really excited about is the stem cell research, wherein the scientists are trying to explore that whether by adding supplements to the stem cells, is it possible to accelerate the recovery or the growth, or to repair the injury. And it has been great to work in the glove box doing this research for them. And I'm just really, really excited to be doing this. And I'm extremely proud of all the teams who have worked together to put up this research for us, and just happy to be here doing this for them. Thank you.
Our science editor, Pallav Bagla, now joins us with a quick update this morning. Always a pleasure to have you on our show, Pallav sir. Shubhanshu Shukla is now nearing the end of his 14-day mission, as you've been reporting. But is his stay likely to be extended?
Well, it depends on when it started. What do you count as the start time? If you look at the correct figures, he has been docked at the International Space Station for a little over 11 days. It's a 14-day mission. So nominally, if all goes well, there is still some time. So if all... NASA is the agency which will announce when the undocking and splashdown will happen. They have not given an update, so we cannot speculate on whether it's an extended mission or not. But as of now, he has spent 11 days docked to the International Space Station, and the count continues. He has completed most of his experiments, and the splashdown for this Axiom 4 mission, which I sometimes call Mission Akash Ganga, is likely to happen off the coast of California. And what I can also add is that Captain Shukla and the 3 other crew members have already done 230 orbits of the Earth. So parikrama pe parikrama, and also that he's traveled nearly 10 million kilometers in journey from Earth as he is orbiting the Earth on the International Space Station. So 11 days and counting as docked, and it will take some more time for them to return. So nominally, things are going as per plan. We have to wait for an update from NASA on the undocking and splashdown. There are many variables they have to consider. The weather off the coast of California, the weather in the descent corridor. So many things have to be considered, and we will hopefully get an update very soon. But as of now, Group Captain Shukla, safe and healthy, enjoying his stay at the International Space Station, like we saw in this bite which came from a little earlier.
As always, sir, thank you so much for joining us with the latest information coming in. On that note, we're slipping into a very quick commercial break. Back in a moment with the latest updates for you. Do stay tuned.
Some say sport is a matter of life and death. The truth is, it is far more serious than that. Sport is about ecstasy and agony, about pain and suffering, about joy and much more. Some say there's no one better to tell these stories. So here I am. Join me, Boria Majumdar, on India's #1 news network.
When facts are fragmented, we put the pieces together. Where power collides with truth, we are there.
Behind me is that massive security arrangements that are in place.
Behind fractured boundaries, we clear the fog of war. Fault Lines with Gauri Dwivedi, only on NDTV World.
In today's interconnected world, India's voice is more crucial than ever. When India speaks, the world listens. At NDTV World, we are that voice, bringing you intelligent and insightful news from India and beyond. From geopolitics and diplomacy to economic shifts, migrations, tech disruptions, and the stories of our diaspora. We cover the news that shapes our global future. NDTV World, your new home for global news, is here.
Let's get you the latest update from Canada now. In a fresh update that could impact thousands of immigration hopefuls, Canada has revised the minimum settlement funds required for candidates under its Express Entry system. So the new thresholds announced by Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada will apply from the 28th of July 2025, and candidates must update their proof of funds by that date to remain eligible for permanent residency. My colleague Maha Siddiqui has been tracking all the finer developments for us. She joins us live from Vancouver at the moment. Maha, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Take us through these new rules.
Thank you, Parmeshwar. The new rules suggest that there will be a change in the fund requirement that anybody who's applied under Express Entry needs to show. This will now rise by about $600 is what we understand for one person. So if one person is applying for it, it will now be almost above $15,000 that they'll have to show as a fund requirement. Apart from that, it depends on the number of people, that is the number of family members that that person is particularly applying for, and funds for that have been raised as well. Now, this is an annual exercise that is undertaken by IRCC, which is the department in Canada, the federal department that looks into immigration, refugee, and citizenship issues. Why this is critical is because there are a large number of applicants, and over the last few years, we have seen an anti-immigrant sentiment that is emerging in Canada, which is new to Canada, considering that for 5 decades, Canada has, in fact, with open arms invited immigrants. But considering that sentiment has changed over the last couple of years because of the housing crisis and inflation, this becomes critical because also not just the fund requirement, there is also other aspects that now continue to impact immigration in Canada. First of all, the categories under which the immigration is likely for skilled workers as well is now largely reduced to 5 to 6 categories, which includes health workers, those in the agriculture sector, trade, sciences, and these are all closely linked to the labor market requirements. So Canada is looking very closely at its requirements and who they want as part of the Canadian society, considering the skills that they bring to the Canadian labor market. And this is in that context now that we are also seeing the funds requirement that have been changed.
Maha, as always, thank you so much for taking us through the latest rules. The other big crucial story we're tracking, Starlink, the satellite communication firm owned by Elon Musk, has received regulatory clearance from the Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center, IN-SPACE, to launch its satellite-based internet services in India as per our sources. Sources indicate that Starlink becomes the third company to receive approval for satellite communication SATCOM services from the Department of Telecommunications after OneWeb and Reliance Jio. Aishwarya Patil has the latest details for us. She joins us live at the moment. Aishwarya, we're given to understand that the final hurdle has been cleared for Starlink's India launch.
That's correct. In-space authorization or clearance that has been granted to Starlink was one of the final steps. As far as the regulatory list of regulatory challenges for Starlink are concerned, that has been granted now for the first generation of its constellation, which has a fleet of about 4,480 satellites in the low Earth orbit that have gotten approval to beam over India. Now, this authorization has cleared the path for Gen 1. Gen 2 will again increase its capacity going forward when that happens ahead of here also. What NDTV Profit had in fact reported back in May was that this first fleet or Gen 1 constellation will have a capacity or an internet service provider that will have a capacity about 600 Gbps over India in the first phase of its launch, is what we had reported earlier. In fact, Starlink will be looking at the next few steps, which will be authorization of a test spectrum. They will have to write to the Department of Telecommunications to ask for a test spectrum and show their capacity and capability to operate their services in India, which will happen in phases again. A trial will be done to prove that their services are in fact working under the security norms that the Indian government has defined. And lastly, the authorization is for the next 5 years or whatever is the shelf life of the Gen 1 satellites, because they will also need to be phased out in a manner in the next 5 years. So whichever happens earlier, Starlink has been provided this authorization, regulatory hurdle has been cleared, and they will now move on to the next step of test spectrum, setting up Earth stations, and then by end of 2025, they aim to provide their satellite communication services to India.
Thanks, Aishwarya, for taking us through the latest information and also giving us the timeline for this. With that, let's turn our attention now to our neighborhood, to Bangladesh. The brutal crackdown on student protesters there last year was ordered by then Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. This is what a leaked audio reveals of a conversation with a senior government official, the BBC is reporting. In the audio that the BBC has verified and NDTV is yet to independently authorize, Sheikh Hasina can be heard saying that she directed the security forces to use lethal weapons and shoot wherever they find them, as in the protesters. Hasina was said to be at her residence in Dhaka when she made the call on the 18th of July, and hours after the call, Military-grade rifles were used by the security forces in Dhaka. This is what the BBC is reporting, citing police documents. My colleague Saurabh has been tracking all the latest details for us. He joins us live from the newsroom at the moment. Saurabh, we're given to understand that the Awami League is hitting out at this latest report that the BBC has verified.
Well, this has become a huge political row between, of course, the Awami League and also, the Mohammad Yunus-led interim government, because the report which has been published by the BBC is claiming that obviously Sheikh Hasina ordered these kind of quelling of protests with brute force, and they are referring to an audio clip which, of course, is something that's the key piece of evidence to make that inference. However, what we are hearing from the Awami League is that, well, these audio clips, they say, has been taken out of context and they say that it's a very small part of a longer conversation. Secondly, they say that the publication has not shared, not mentioned the source of the audio clip, but the source happens to be the prosecution team, which of course is conducting the trials against Sheikh Hasina. So this has become a political row, not only over the veracity of the clip, but also the inference made from the clip, which of course has been reported by the BBC. And of course this is something that now is dominating the political discourse in Bangladesh, whether Sheikh Hasina is responsible for the crackdown, or whether there were infiltrators amongst the protesters, as the Bangladesh Awami League says that Hizbul Tahrir, which is of course a group that is known with extremist radical links, whether they also instigated some of these sort of violent incidents that took place during that August revolution. So there are questions on the report that's been published, but again, the report very clearly makes the inference that Sheikh Hasina did order these sort of killings based on an audio clip which has been challenged, the veracity of which has been challenged, the authenticity of which has been challenged by the Bangladesh Awami League.
Thank you so much, as always, Saurabh, for joining us with the latest information coming in and also clarifying the details. In other news, Russia has targeted Ukraine with a record 728 drones. This assault comes just hours after US President Donald Trump pledged to send more defensive weapons to Kyiv and aimed unusually sharp criticism at Russian President Vladimir Putin. In fact, these attacks, they are the latest in the series of escalating air assaults in recent weeks that have involved hundreds of drones in addition to ballistic missiles, straining Ukrainian air defenses at a perilous moment in the war. Meanwhile, over in Washington, Western media reports are claiming that Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth halted a planned shipment of American weapons to Ukraine on the 2nd of July without notifying the White House. The pause shipment included key military hardware, and some of these munitions had already arrived in Poland and were actually en route to Kyiv when the order came through. Meanwhile, a suspected Chinese state-sponsored hacker is behind bars in Italy. He is accused of cyber espionage targeting US COVID-19 research. A 33-year-old was arrested last week in Milan's airport just as he arrived on holiday with his wife. The US Justice Department says he's part of a Chinese hacking group linked to Beijing's Ministry of State Security. Well, planet heating pollution tripled the death toll from the quietly devastating heat wave that seared Europe at the end of June. Early analysis covering a dozen cities has found, as experts warned of a worsening health crisis that is being overlooked. Scientists estimate that high heat killed 2,300 people across 12 major cities as temperatures soared across Europe between the 23rd of June and 2nd of July. They attributed 1,500 of the deaths to climate breakdown, which has heated the planet and made the worst extremes even hotter. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is likely to travel to the United Kingdom by the end of this month for a visit that could see both sides formally ink the landmark India-UK free trade deal and explore ways to expand bilateral ties in defence and security. Both sides are in the process of finalising the dates for Prime Minister Modi's visit to the UK, by the end of July or the first part of August, our sources have informed us. NVIDIA has become the first company in history to reach a $4 trillion valuation. The market cap milestone for the US firm, which makes hardware to power the artificial intelligence boom, marks a rebound from earlier this year when the rise of Chinese AI startup DeepSeek caused NVIDIA shares to dip. The achievement also comes despite US chip export restrictions that have dented sales to China. India is currently the leading country of origin for billionaire immigrants in the US. Forbes has noted in its America's Richest Immigrants 2025 list that was just published. Israel and Taiwan are next on the list. But the article further notes that cybersecurity mogul Jair Chaudhary is the richest Indian American in the US. He has a whopping net worth of over $17.9 billion. The Forbes list highlights Indian Americans like Jair Chaudhary, Sundar Pichai, and Vinod Khosla as prominent Indian origin billionaires. But overall, the richest immigrant in the United States is Tesla's boss, Elon Musk, who is also the richest man in the world with a whopping net worth of nearly $400 billion. Thank you for investing your time and watching this edition of The World 24/7. As always, we'll keep tracking the latest for you. Do stay tuned.
Sleepless for sports. We are reloading sports NDTV style. With the biggest comeback this season, India's OG sports journalist on India's #1 news network.
No games, just sports.
Sports coverage levels up with Boria Majumdar on NDTV.
When facts are fragmented, we put the pieces together. Where power collides with truth, we are there.
Behind me is that massive security arrangements that are in place.
Behind fractured boundaries, we clear the fog of war. Fault Lines with Gauri Dwivedi, only on NDTV World.
In today's interconnected world, India's voice is more crucial than ever. When India speaks, the world listens. At NDTV World, we are that voice, bringing you intelligent and insightful news from India and beyond. From geopolitics and diplomacy to economic shifts, migrations, tech disruptions, and the stories of our diaspora. We cover the news that shapes our global future. NDTV World, your new home for global news, is here.
This is NDTV, and you're watching NDTV 24/7.
A very good morning. You're watching NDTV 24/7. I'm Divya Vazan. We have a whole lot lined up for you, including after Sena Thagri, now intimidation. Well, the canteen at the Akashwani, the MLA guest house in Maharashtra, has now the license for the canteen has been cancelled by the FTA. We'll get you all the details of what's taking place in Maharashtra. But first, let's get you the headlines. After Sena Thagri, now intimidation, food police cancels Maharashtra canteens license. We're talking about Akashwani, where the guest house of the MLAs is in Maharashtra. Well, now FTA has cancelled the food license instead of taking action against Sanjay Gaikwad. Karnataka's Chief Minister and Deputy Chief Minister will be meeting the Congress brass today. A meeting expected with Rahul Gandhi after meeting Defence Minister Rajnath Singh. The two leaders met with Rajnath Singh yesterday, and DK Shivkumar met with Priyanka Gandhi Vajra. In Gujarat, the bridge tragedy that's claimed 13 lives. Politics speaks over the collapse that took place and the opposition targeting the Gujarat model. Do remember, this bridge was 40 years old. Trump targets Brazil with tariffs, and we're talking about US President Donald Trump there slapping 50% tariffs on Brazil. US crackdown on Chinese hacker. Allegedly, this hacker has been held for COVID research theft. And it's India versus England to lock horns at the Lords, and that epic battle that starts today at the Mecca of cricket. Bumrah returns for the Lords, and of course this really comes at a time when we'll be getting you all the very latest with Boria Majumdar. Let's get to your top story, and that's the Maharashtra Food and Drug Administration that's cancelled the license of the canteen whose staffer was assaulted by Shiv Sena MLA over the quality of dal. Do remember that Sanjay Gaikwad had complained that the dal was smelling, but that's not where it stopped. He punched, he pushed that very staffer, and all of that was recorded on camera. Now, the Food and Drug Administration has suspended the license of Ajanta Caterers, which operated at the Kashwani MLA canteen following that incident that took place with Sanjay Gaikwad assaulting the canteen employees. So, taking action against Sanjay Gaikwad, well, it is the food police that has now cancelled the license of the caterer instead. My colleague Sujata Trivedi joining us from Mumbai to get us the very latest. Sujata, this kind of action that's being taken, is, it's very strange that no action so far has been taken against their own Sanjay Gaikwad, the MLA who was seen caught on camera assaulting someone. And now assaulting a person does not amount to an issue in Maharashtra, but serving a dal, which perhaps during the rainy season could have gone bad for any sort of reason, and this can happen to anyone's house as well. You don't have to go outside. This could perhaps, take place in any household of Maharashtra, any state of India. But the action so far has only been taken against the canteen.
Well, absolutely, and action now being taken against the caterers who was responsible for serving and operating this MLA canteen situated right next to Mantralaya. And we know that because it's the assembly session, majority of the MLAs, they reside in the building right next to the canteen, and often the food that reaches them in their rooms comes from this particular canteen only. Now, we know for a matter of fact that yesterday when the incident happened, after that we took reactions from across political parties as well as the Chief Minister and the Deputy Chief Minister reacting to this. They though condemned it, yet no sort of action was taken against Sanjay Gaikwad, and now it is in fact on the other end the canteen that has been shut by the FTA, citing to various irregularities that were noted down during the inspection that was done yesterday. Now, to just pan and show you around, this is the canteen which becomes operational since morning up till late night, 10:30, 11, and now it has been shut, and all of the staff, we can see some of them present inside, and they're cleaning the floors. Now, there were multiple reasons that were given, stating that there was unhygienic practices, worker hygiene, improper food handling, poor storage, lack of pest control, and multiple such violations were taken. But this is a very technical aspect. But as per the videos that are being circulated online, and we know for a matter of fact that it was Sanjay Gaikwad who was behind, and how he was hitting and assaulting a worker who did not even make that stale food that he was complaining about. yet he was hit, and thereafter we have never seen him again at this particular spot. He was a regular worker here who used to be present throughout the day, but ever since the incident has happened, he's been asked to not come, and so that, if we confront him in any sort, he could speak about his ordeal, and they don't want that to happen. So somewhere it is clearly, on one end, Sanjay Gaikwad clearly stating that what he did was right. He tried justifying his act, stating that if something like this happens again, he is already ready with the Shiv Sena style of dealing with people in a violent manner. After the MNS style, this is the Shiv Sena style, and along with that, it is Mr. Gaikwad justifying his act, stating that he is clearly a sportsperson and he knows how to physically deal with people when it comes to such actions. And at the same time, though the CM and the Deputy Chief Minister Eknath Shinde himself, he cornered by this act and stated that what has happened is not right and they do not side by it. But that's not it. What about actions to be taken? Why has suo motu cognizance not been taken in the matter is a bigger question in the tray, because we know that it was recently the MNS case that they had to face so much of backlash, and then there were FIRs registered only and only because they were hitting somebody who was not even at fault. And the same case could be seen here, but this time it is the Shiv Sena. We know that he is a MLA from Buldana, and this is not his, not a new incident to him. He has been violent in the past as well. There have been videos being circulated online which could be clearly seen that he is assaulting people. He's giving controversial statements. So what about these? Why and when will these MLAs who pertain to be some powerful men, when will they stop doing such activities that could create sort of chaos in the society? And what will the government do to take action against them is a bigger question, because...
Right, Sujata, of course, yesterday we heard Devendra Fadnavis calling this behavior absolutely unacceptable and not honourable to anyone. In fact, he said that this really tarnishes the reputation of all legislators. But is that all that's going to be said and nothing done about the situation is the big question here?
Well, absolutely, and we know for a matter of fact that there were total two case studies into this matter, and on one end it was we saw that how Sanjay Gaikwad, he hit somebody and he was not even trying to feel sorry for that, and he instead justified it by saying that what he did was right, and he's going to repeat it. So there was no sort of bad feelings that he had. And on the other hand, it was the FDA who was sent here, and the food inspectors, they were present here throughout the day. They were inspecting the entire canteen. They were trying to find out what could go wrong and why was it that stale food was provided. Now action on the administrative part has been done. The canteen has been locked and it has been shut today, and their license has been suspended of Ajanta Caterers. But what about the other part? We know that Sanjay Gaikwad has hit somebody. He's hit somebody so bad that he's currently treating himself, getting himself the treatment and in hospital. What about that person? Why is the police not initiating action against Sanjay Gaikwad is even a bigger question to understand, because just because the FDA license has been cancelled doesn't mean that Mr. Sanjay Gaikwad can get away with it, and instead there should be action initiated against him as well, though the Chief Minister himself said that they do not stand by this, and it definitely does send a wrong message in the society, especially by somebody like a MLA from Buldana who happens to be a lawmaker, and he's been very vocal about it.
Absolutely.
But all of a sudden him getting out of his room, not even in proper attire, coming out and hitting somebody is even more concerning.
Right, let's just listen into what he said, being absolutely defiant and not being apologetic. Forget being apologetic, no remorse, no regret. Let's listen in to Sanjay Gaikwad.
माफी नहीं मांगूंगा। मुख्यमंत्री ने नाराजगी, मुख्यमंत्री ने विधान परिषद में कहा किस तरीके से बर्ताव, लेकिन आपके बर्ताव को लेकर मुख्यमंत्री महोदय और उप मुख्यमंत्री महोदय जो कहा है वो उनका कर्तव्य है। कायदा सुव्यवस्था रखना या कोई हमारा आमदार से गलती होती है तो सब बात करना वो उनका काम ही है। मैं उनके जो उन्होंने कहा है उसका मैं आदर भी करता हूँ, लेकिन उन्होंने ये भी कहा कि जो घटना ये जिस वजह से घड़ी उसकी भी इंक्वायरी होनी चाहिए, वो होटल की भी इंक्वायरी होनी चाहिए, ये भी उन्होंने कहा है।
लेकिन आपने जो कुछ किया उसको लेकर आपको कहीं कोई पछतावा है कि नहीं बर्ताव करना चाहिए?
नहीं, कोई पछतावा नहीं है। मैं जहर खाने वाला था, बाकी लोग ये समझ नहीं सकते, इसलिए मैंने जो किया है उसमें मुझे कोई पछतावा नहीं है।
क्या पार्टी आपके साथ है इस मामले, क्योंकि उन्होंने भी नाराजगी व्यक्त नहीं होना चाहिए?
मुझे ये करने के लिए कोई पार्टी ने नहीं बोला है, कोई पार्टी के नेता नहीं बोला है, इसलिए पार्टी साथ में होने का सवाल नहीं आता। ये मेरा वैयक्तिक डिसीजन है।
बात रखी मुख्यमंत्री की नाराजगी के बारे में क्या कहेंगे? मुख्यमंत्री की नाराजगी के बारे में क्या कहेंगे? मुख्यमंत्री की नाराजगी के बारे में क्या बोलेंगे?
Saurabh joining us to get us the very latest. Saurabh, we just heard Sanjay Gaikwad there saying that action should also be taken against the canteen and the guest house, and that's exactly what's played out here. If action has been taken against the canteen, then what about action being taken up against the man himself, Sanjay Gaikwad, who was seen on camera? It's not hearsay. There's proof in the matter, and Devendra Fadnavis says it's absolutely unacceptable. But is that all that's going to come out of this? Is from really talking against the man and not taking any action against the man? The big questions that are being raised here by people who can see everything on camera, and of course, form that decision in regard to the action that really needs to be taken and the action that needs to be taken against Sanjay Gaikwad instead of just the canteen.
Absolutely, this remains NDTV's campaign against this kind of bullying, boorish behavior by people in positions of power. And of course, this is what we call India against VIP thugs. And of course, there are several big questions on this. And one of the big questions, of course, is the fact that will this MLA be arrested? He's a Shiv Sena MLA, Sanjay Gaikwad. Will he be arrested? That's the first question that we're asking on NDTV. And that's important because, look, what has followed is something that's a part of procedure. It could be a part of procedure. If there's a complaint about some food, it could be a part of procedure. And that, of course, brings us to the second question, that will the Shiv Sena, the party to which Mr. Sanjay Gaikwad belongs to, will the Shiv Sena allow action against him? Or will it protect him while condemning his behavior? Because really, there has to be action against Mr. Sanjay Gaikwad. The third question now is, of course, the action that's followed this whole, behavior by Mr. Gaikwad and the FDA's action. Now, the FDA is supposed to keep track of whether hygienic food is being served or not. But in this case, it begs the question, is this an attempt to intimidate the canteen? Because in the first place, the FDA should have conducted checks earlier. This is a VIP canteen. This is an MLA canteen. What was the reason that, the FDA team woke up to this issue only after this incident of this MLA slapping, brutally, punching someone, throwing him to the ground? So was the FDA really waiting for something like this? And is this an attempt to intimidate is the third big question we are asking. The fourth question is, of course, there is also, why did the FDA only wake up after this, VIP thugs violence? Overall, how is the FDA functioning, or does it only act when, somebody indulges in behavior like this? And of course, the last one is, of course, will Maharashtra's VIP thugs be reined in? When will this kind of behavior stop? This is, of course, an ongoing campaign on NDTV India against VIP thugs, and we'll be tracking every detail, every case where there is behavior that is like this, especially by people in power.
Thank you so much, sir, for getting us all the very latest. Moving on now to Karnataka and the suspense over. Before we get to our next story, let's also listen in to Sanjay Gaikwad there, smiling, being defiant, not being apologetic, but rather demanding action be taken against the canteen.
माफी क्यों मांगेंगे? माफी नहीं मांगूंगा।
मुख्यमंत्री ने नाराजगी
मुख्यमंत्री ने विधान परिषद में कहा
किस तरीके से बर्ताव,
लेकिन आपके बर्ताव को लेकर मुख्यमंत्री महोदय और उप मुख्यमंत्री ने जो कहा है वो उनका कर्तव्य है। कायदा सुव्यवस्था रखना या कोई हमारा आमदार से गलती होती है तो वो सब बात करना वो उनका काम ही है। मैं उनके जो उन्होंने कहा है उसका मैं आदर भी करता हूँ, लेकिन उन्होंने ये भी कहा कि जो घटना ये जिस वजह से घड़ी उसकी भी इंक्वायरी होनी चाहिए, वो होटल की भी इंक्वायरी होनी चाहिए, ये भी उन्होंने कहा है।
लेकिन आपने जो कुछ किया उसको लेके आपको कहीं कोई पछतावा है कि नहीं बर्ताव करना चाहिए?
नहीं, कोई पछतावा नहीं है। मैं जहर खाने वाला था, बाकी लोग ये समझ नहीं सकते, इसलिए मैंने जो किया है उसमें मुझे कोई पछतावा नहीं है।
क्या पार्टी आपके साथ है इस मामले में? क्योंकि उन्होंने भी नाराजगी व्यक्त नहीं होना चाहिए।
मुझे ये करने के लिए कोई पार्टी ने नहीं बोला है, कोई पार्टी के नेता नहीं बोला है, इसलिए पार्टी साथ में होने का सवाल नहीं आता। ये मेरा वैयक्तिक डिसीजन है।
मुख्यमंत्री की नाराजगी के बारे में क्या कहेंगे? मुख्यमंत्री की नाराजगी के बारे में क्या कहेंगे? मुख्यमंत्री की नाराजगी के बारे में क्या कहेंगे? मुख्यमंत्री साहब की नाराजगी दूर।
Well, Sanjay Gaikwad there heard, in fact, smiling away and saying that action needs to be taken against the canteen. And that's exactly what the government has done. It is the FTA that's cancelled the license of that canteen at Akashwani, the guest house of the MLAs. And there, no action being taken against Sanjay Gaikwad, instead, who was seen on camera, caught on camera, assaulting, punching, as well as slapping the staffer at the canteen. Moving on now to Karnataka, and the suspense as far as the Karnataka's Chief Minister post that has now shifted to Bengaluru, from Bengaluru to Delhi, and both Siddaramaiah and DK Shivkumar, who are here in the national capital, they today will be meeting with Rahul Gandhi. Well, both Siddaramaiah and DK Shivkumar met with Rajnath Singh yesterday, and more importantly, it was DK Shivkumar who met with Priyanka Gandhi Vadra yesterday before meeting with Rahul Gandhi today. To know more on what's going to be taking place today in the national capital, we have Sunil joining us. Sunil, both the leaders went to meet the defense minister, but from what we're hearing, from what we're picking up, and speculation is rife that DK Shivkumar might have met with Priyanka Gandhi Vadra in order to put his case before her before meeting with brother Rahul Gandhi.
Well, it's definitely something that the Congress party is very exercised about. They have already ruled out the possibility of a change of chief minister. But be that as it may, I think the focus clearly for the Congress party is to ensure that they work unitedly, work as a united house. There is definitely aspirations of DK Shivkumar to take over as chief minister, Mr. Siddaramaiah, who's been the chief minister. All of them have to work together. And I think somewhere down the line, Rahul Gandhi will have to use his diplomatic skills as well as his persuasive power to ensure that the Congress remains united in the run-up to the Lok Sabha elections as well as the state elections, which will be due in another 2 years' time. There have been a lot of issues in terms of governance, in terms of how the Congress party has gone about this entire process. And hopefully, Mr. Karge, as well as Rahul Gandhi, as well as Mr. K.C. Venugopal, will find a way forward to ensure that the aspirations of all these leaders are met and they're able to actually deliver on the promises that they've made to the people of Karnataka.
Right, all eyes on that very crucial meeting coming up in the national capital of Rahul Gandhi meeting with Siddaramaiah as well as DK Shivkumar. Sunil, we will keep coming back to you for more on that. Moving on, a report in the well-regarded aviation journal, The Air Current, says that the ongoing investigation into the cause of the 12th of June crash of Air India Flight 171 has narrowed its focus to the movement of engine fuel control switches. The article, which attributes this information to multiple people with knowledge of the investigation, comes in a week when India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Board is expected to make its preliminary report public, and that is going to be taking place this week itself. My colleague Vishnu Som brings us all the details.
Let's take a look at the cockpit. This is the cockpit of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner that you see over here. And what we'll now zoom into is this area. This is the throttle quadrant, as it were, the throttles of the aircraft. Now, as we explain this, the throttles become quite important. And what you see over here is the next important point, the fuel switches, the fuel cutoff switches. Again, that's what this report is going to largely focus on. So keep these in mind as we discuss what the well-regarded aviation journal, The Air Current, has had to say in a fresh report. In its report, Air Current says that the ongoing investigation into the cause of the June 12th crash of AI-171 has narrowed its focus to the movement of the engine fuel control switches. So these are the engine fuel control switches. They lie just behind the throttle levers of the aircraft. And we are going to be talking a great deal about this, as I mentioned. So according to this well-regarded journal, the investigation is going to be focusing, or is focusing, on the fuel control levers themselves. Now, why is that important? Well, there are a few theories we need to examine around these fuel switches. And let us assert that there is no one clear answer that we have at all. Firstly, if one of the engines of the Dreamliner had malfunctioned, as may well have been the case, did one of the switches of the fuel switch of the operational engine, did a pilot switch off the fuel switch of the operational engine instead of the one that was actually functioning. So again, now this is looking at the possibility of a single engine failure. And in the event of a single engine failure, which sometimes, in fact, quite frequently results in the fuel control lever being cut off, whereby pushing this down, lifting it and pushing it down, was there a possibility, and is it at all realistic for a scenario where with one working engine, one of the pilots, instead of switching this off or this off, switched the operational engine off? In other words, in a two-engine aircraft, was there a situation where there was no fuel flow at all? Now, that's the last thing you want in a situation like this. If you were wondering why would pilots switch off fuel flow, well, that's what I sort of answered just now. But in the event of a dual engine failure, pilots toggle fuel control switches on and off in an attempt to restart the switches. So Dreamliner pilots essentially are doubtful of what I explained, of a scenario where both the fuel control switches were switched off, one because there was no fuel flow, and accidentally the operational engine's fuel flow was also cut off. So pilots are doubtful of that scenario on the Dreamliner itself. Now they say, and let's go to the next page, that in the event of a dual engine failure, pilots toggle the fuel control switches on and off in an attempt to restart the engines. So if that were to take place, sure, focus on the fuel control switches. You need them to reset the switches, the system itself, by putting them on and off, perhaps on a couple of occasions, we don't know how much, to try and get the engines to ignite once again. And that there is a process to deliberately shut down fuel flow should that be required in certain scenarios. And it's not an instant process. If the pilots did deliberately want to do that, this would include switching off, firstly, the auto throttle unit that has controls over here in the top of the panel in the cockpit. They would then bring the thrust lever. This controls the thrust of the aircraft. They would bring down the thrust lever on the engine, which they wanted to, and then they would turn their attention to the fuel control switches and then switch off that fuel switch. And this entire process would be monitored by two pilots, two sets of eyes. What the pilot flying would be working with the pilot monitoring in this scenario. So the point in all of this is that it's not enough to say that the fuel control switches were switched off inadvertently by one of the pilots in a scenario where only one engine was functioning. That seems, according to lots of Dreamliner pilots that I have spoken to, an unrealistic scenario, even though it is hypothetically possible. So where does that leave us? Well, the preliminary report is due any day now per international conventions that India is a part of. It has to be released within 30 days of the crash. That would make July 11th the cutoff date. Now, the Air Current report also says, and this is interesting, the lack of any kind of advisory warning from Boeing or General Electric operators. Remember, the engine on Air India 787s are General Electric powered engines. So the fact that there's not been an advisory warning in the 13 days that have followed the initial black box reading on the 25th of June is a key signal that a mechanical failure is not immediately suspected as the likely cause of the crash. Now, to be certain, at this stage, we still don't know if this is a pilot error or mechanical error or a larger problem which could potentially impact Dreamliner operations elsewhere in the world.
Let's get you the latest from the poll-bound state of Bihar. And the Supreme Court today will be taking up a batch of petitions challenging the legality of the special intensive revision of electoral rules being conducted by the Election Commission in the poll-bound state. Now, the Supreme Court will be urgently hearing that batch of petitions. And to know more on this, we have Nupur joining us to get us the very latest on this. Nupur, take us through this case that is being made in regard to the Election Commission's move that threatens the core values of free and fair elections and also representative of a democracy, which really forms part of the Constitution's basic structure. And that is really what is going to be taken up by the Supreme Court today.
Well, there were several political parties, remember, have moved the Supreme Court alleging that lakhs of voters would be disenfranchised in this exercise that is proposed by the Election Commission of India. Remember, this is not a new exercise. Special intensive revision is part of functions of Election Commission of India. Last SIR was carried out in 2003 in Bihar. Now, what the contentions that is raised by the political parties, including Congress, RJD, and several range of opposition parties, is that this is a targeted move by Election Commission of India to disenfranchise voters which are essentially voters of the opposition, and they claim that it would lead to lakhs of voters, especially the poor, the marginalized, and the women being disenfranchised.